UFC 280 is the most anticipated card of 2022. Two title fights and so many well-known and skilled fighters on both the prelims and the main card. If you don't watch the UFC regularly, this is the moment you should tune in and invite your friends. Enough said, let's talk about the main event of the card. Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. This fight is not just a title fight between the two best lightweights in the world competing for the belt, but two of the best martial arts in the world, namely Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Combat Sambo, competing for the best grappling style in MMA. And behind this fight, each of them has an entire nation behind them. This fight is so big, it almost brought me back feeling like it's Khabib versus Conor for the second time. Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev both came in the UFC undefeated. However, the former did not show his championship mentality at the beginning of his career, whereas the latter is always seen as a title contender prospect. I think the reason that we, the fans, hyped up for Islam so much is because Khabib's legacy. I do not blame you because I was on the Sambo hype train for a long time. I still am, but Charles has shown his ability to overcome adversity, which led me to believe he's one of the best, if not the best lightweight in the world. Although both have similar win streaks, Charles Oliveira has fought many more high caliber fighters than Islam, such as Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje, and Tony Ferguson, whereas Islam only fought one guy from the top 10, Dan Hooker. People should not overlook Charles Oliveira's skill set. This guy can strike, wrestle, scramble, and not just do them, but do them at the highest level. Now let's take a step back and take a closer look at the various aspects of these two fighters and see who has the upper hand. First, striking. Islam Makhachev's striking is underrated because his ground game is extremely elite, so people often overlook his ability to strike. In my opinion, Islam is more calculated with his strikes. He almost always has a good high guard, never overextend or load up for punches. Since he can take you down anywhere and anytime, it is hard to fully commit to strike with him. On the other hand, unlike the champions, Charles Oliveira is super aggressive from the first second of the fight. Though he is the uncrowned champion, he does not care about playing it safe. He is not trying to figure you out or outpoint you on the scorecard. From the moment the first bell rings, he just wants to take your head off. Oliveira's Muay Thai guard allows him to neutralize leg kicks, as we have seen from the Justin Gaethje fight. Gaethje almost missed all his leg kicks, and the fight against Dustin Poirier, Oliveira has shown he can deal with heavy puncher at close range by grabbing the opponent's neck and using his knee to break the momentum. And not just knees, Oliveira's elbows are also extremely lethal. His attacks reminds me of prime Tony Ferguson, but better. He knows how to mix up his attacks from head to toe. However, we have seen Oliveira get dropped multiple times, whereas Islam rarely gets caught clean. Fighters can only take so many shots until their bodies just collapse. At the end of the day, I believe Charles has more tools on the feet than Islam. So I'm giving Charles 5.5 to 4.5 on striking. Second, grappling. However, I think the reason Oliveira can find so much success on the feet is due to his ability on the ground. Since no one wants to fight him on the ground, he dictates where the fight goes. But I have to say, Oliveira has never fought a high-level grappler like Islam. All three of his title defenses are against strikers. But I don't believe Islam would be afraid to go to the ground with him. This might change things up a little bit. We might see a different style from Oliveira this time. On the other hand, Islam hasn't fought any submission artists like Oliveira as well. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. Islam trains with the best grapplers in the world like Khabib, but Charles has the most submissions in the UFC. Islam has openly said on the podcast about Charles tapping night times in the UFC. Therefore, he does not believe Charles is the best in the world. But we cannot look at the past of Charles anymore. The dude has finished 13 out of his last 14 fights. However, Combat Sambo is no joke. From the fight Islam had with Thiago Moises, we see Islam's ability to dominate a very high-level BJJ grappler. Though Thiago Moises is not as good as Charles Oliveira, we can still see some potential resemblance between the two, and how Islam would react in those situations. And the fight between Islam and Saryukian also shown Islam's ability to scramble. That was very early in his career. Makhachev has only gotten better since. So I'm giving Islam 5.5 to 4.5 against Charles Oliveira on grappling. Third, endurance. Endurance is a tricky one to judge. I see why people would favor Makhachev on this aspect, but again, we are looking at a 2.0 Charles Oliveira. He's no longer the quitter anymore. From recent memories, Charles Oliveira has always come guns blazing in every single round and never looked tired in his last 4 fights in the UFC. So I'm inclined to believe he has a great gas tank. And from what we have seen on the internet, Islam has been training every single day in the gym with Khabib since his childhood. Training has become part of Islam's lifestyle, and we have never seen Islam get tired as well. So I'm giving this a 5 to 5 even. Fifth, mindset. Charles has shown us many times he can overcome adversities in the octagon, and I believe that is what ultimately those two warriors will compete on. Almost whenever we have two equally good fighters to compete, the more hungry one is likely to win. Charles has become this unstoppable force in the UFC recently, and I believe momentum is a huge factor in the sport if it is used correctly. I just don't think anyone can break Charles Oliveira's bulletproof mindset right now. On the other hand, we have not seen Islam in bad situations yet. Yes, we may say this is because he's so good that no one has been able to make him look bad. But at the same time, we don't know whether Islam can overcome the storm. So I'm giving this one to Charles 5.5 to 4.5. Now we have analyzed 5 different aspects of those two fighters. I have to say, this is a close fight. Both fighters are on the top of the food chain with momentum behind them. If I were to bet money on this fight, I would bet on Charles Oliveira. He has gone through so much since he came into the UFC. I found it easier to relate our life to Charles's progression in the UFC. From someone average and becoming champion through hard work. Success comes after suffering and obstacles. And I respect so much for those who fail and can keep pursuing what they want. I'm always a fan of Islam, but this time I'm rooting for Charles Oliveira. And that's everything for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, leave a comment. I will respond to everyone. And finally, thanks for watching and see you next time.